the data that doesn't tell a good news story is probably not going to get shared, but that data might be more useful because it says like, hey, if your efforts have been focused on like moving the needle on this metric, it's not working. Like it's either stagnating or getting worse. And there are certainly examples of that, but like we're not going to publicize it and we're not going to talk about it in forums where people can like make productive choices based on it. So like there kind of needs to be like there's two different kinds of reporting on the data. There's the advertising kind where you're like trying to get more money for your program and convince people it's amazing. And then there's the actual informing decisions kind.
Team, welcome back to another week of Mops and Mo's, measures of performance, measures of effectiveness, here with Drew and Alex, off the back of, I guess in real time recording this, off the back of our Fort Benning escapades last week.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your cat
messing
with a bag?
First recording since travel. What's up?
Is that your cat messing with a bag behind you?
Cat does not have the bag. Emily kindly got groceries and is putting them away right now. So I am not going to be upset with her for the noise of the bags.
That's fair. No, that's fair. Most folks might not be able to hear it. This week, we don't have a guest.
No guest.
We just have us. And we are exploring. Well, before we do that, should we talk about my braised chicken?
I mean, you seemed pretty excited about this when I was texting you earlier. So I figured you were cooking up something good, but now it sounds not so good.
Well, I think by this point, it's probably pretty well known that like ChatGPT kind of serves as my...
Are you once again blaming AI for your food coming out shitty? Because this is becoming a trend.
Well, for this exact reason, I thought, okay, you know what? This week, I am going to go back to the cookbooks, of which I have a lot. I like cookbooks. And this particular cookbook, because I had chicken legs from the farm down the road, and I thought, okay, let's see what this book can offer. The recipe on offer, in fact, was braised chicken legs with, what was it? Tomato, garlic, onion. I was like, okay, this sounds pretty good.
Hard to screw that up. That's pretty good. Pretty good basics.
And to get a little bit deeper, this is Alice Waters, right? World famous chef, farm to table, like connoisseur, very simple ingredients. So not a lot you could screw up. So I braised the chicken with the onions, the tomatoes, the garlic, and ended up with like plain chicken in oniony tomato water. It was gross. I don't know what it was supposed to look like. I don't know what it was supposed to taste like. So it was not good. So anyway,
listeners of like particularly recent episodes might be coming to the conclusion that Drew is really bad at cooking. I have limited evidence because I've only been to Drew's house one time, but I swear he did. It was really good. He did. I don't remember what the sauce was, but it was like farm to table from scratch.
Here's the thing. I would count myself to be very competent in the kitchen. What the Mops and Mo's family continues to hear is me pushing the boundaries. Right. I'm exploring the edges. And when you explore the edges, sometimes you end up with kind of plain chicken and oniony tomato water. Needless to say, we won't be using that recipe again. I did last week make it delicious. So actually, last night I had a beer blanc, a little butter sauce with scallion. Oh, it was fantastic. So
now you sound like a better cook. Now you like,
because I use a French word. It ebbs and flows. But anyway, this week, guys, we don't have a guest. We have a conversation. And we're calling it Pandora's Box. Basically, we're opening Pandora's Box. And there's a little bit of background to this, and jump in whenever. I came across an article, which we'll reference here quite a bit. This article is titled, we'll put it in the show notes, but it's titled Band-Aids for Bullet Wounds. State Changing to Survive Your Own Life. This was written by a gentleman by the name of Michael Blevins, a guy that we've talked about potentially getting on the podcast before.
But you were already chasing this idea before the article, right?
We talked about this idea before the article. I think what the article did for me was like give me a language to really like hit it home. And again, we'll pull quotes from here throughout just to kind of reinforce it. But So we kind of shared this article, and then we gave our speech, our talk at Fort Benning, where we effectively were deconstructing metrics and like what are we really doing with metrics and some of the fallacies that people fall into when they pursue metrics. We talked about McNamara's fallacy, et cetera. And then we were kind of bantering back and forth about what we could talk about when the upcoming H2F symposium here in a couple of months. And I think what kind of started to happen in my head was this realization of like, hold on a second. Is in this case, the Army, but again, as always, you could blow this out to the broader military. Is the military ready to actually find out the things that it wants to find out with all of this data that we're collecting, right? So like,
or talking about collecting, because some of it we're not
talking about collecting,
yeah.
Right? So there's this ongoing conversation of like, and it's been going on for years. Like, collect the data, do the thing, get the metrics, measure the stuff. And I think these programs by and large have propped themselves up under the auspices that like the effort of the pursuit of those metrics is justification for the program itself. Hopefully that makes sense. But inevitably, if we take this kind of line of thinking to its logical endpoint, we will have arrived at some future point where we have all of this information. We have the systems, we have the data, we've collected this stuff, and this stuff will show us something. And so the question I kind of started to chew on was like, what if it shows us something? Are we prepared to make the change to actually impact the thing? And to like distill this down into a very singular point that we'll get into, right? Sleep is a good example of this because sleep is something we can measure. But I think most folks who measure sleep kind of know the answer to the question, right? Soldiers don't get enough sleep. We know that before we put rings or wearables on them.
Can I go on a brief tangent here?
Please.
Somebody pointed out to me recently that if you go to the Pentagon, every senior leader is wearing like at least one wearable device that's tracking their stuff.
For sure.
And I mean, shout out to Aura. I don't know how they really pulled it off, but like they've managed to get those rings on a lot of senior leaders.
They have those leaders wrapped around their finger.
Well, some of those leaders like went and bought those rings, but a lot of them just kind of got like scooped into studies that were going on.
For sure.
Well done. Credit to you guys there. But I hear the same thing from every senior leader who wore an Aura ring, at least for a little bit. And it wasn't until like I really saw what like a Chipotle burrito or a couple beers in the evening did to my sleep. But like you knew that. Like we know that. Yeah. You don't need to put a ring on every person to know that like a couple beers close to bedtime is going to mess up everybody's sleep. Like, yes, it makes it more personal to see it in your own data and stuff like that. But like we're collecting data just to like illustrate stuff we already know. Mm-hmm. And if we already know it, we could be doing something about it, but we don't really. And like, yes, there's a place for making it personal, but
that's the question. I think that's what you and I have kind of arrived at here and why we call this Pandora's box, because I think once you open this, once you realize this, you can't unrealize it, which is to say that, okay, we collect all this stuff and it shows us the things we need to change. Will we change those things? I think the reverse cycle PT conversation that's been happening on Instagram is another example of this. Like we have use cases and we have certain leaders that have shown just wildly successful examples of reverse cycle PT. Yet, and you've seen this because when you post about it, every comment.
Can I call you out for a second?
Please.
I got to call you out for I got to call you out and then I got to call other people out.
Call me out.
I'm calling you out because you keep using the term reverse cycle, and it's a term everybody likes. And even on our Discord, people are using the term reverse cycle. And I think reverse cycle implies the entire unit switching from everybody doing PT at 6:30 to everybody doing PT at whatever afternoon time you choose. And I think
fair.
We haven't had the 11th Airborne folks on. We were hoping to have them on like this week or next week, but they've got a lot of field training stuff going on, so that episode might not come out for a while. But one of the core points their leadership has emphasized a bunch of times, and so I do want to like do justice to them, is it is not about taking everybody's PT time and making it a different time. It's delegating the decision about PT time to a lower level to introduce some flexibility, to introduce some planning stuff, to introduce autonomy at lower echelons of leadership. That's an important one. This episode is not about reverse cycle PT. But the other one is every time I post about it, because you're talking about how we get all these reactions whenever we post about it, a lot of the comments are like, this isn't new. Like, my unit did this 17 years ago. Like, no, of course it's not new. Like, we had Dr. East on
forever
like years ago at this point, and he talked about like the origins of Army PT and how it was not early in the morning. But we're not posting about it or discussing it because it's new. We are posting about it and discussing it because it seems so hard for units to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like this study has been done, this data has been collected every few years for decades. It all points in the right direction. And then for whatever reason, we revert back to the way we've always done it, even though everybody agreed that this new way was better. So like, that's why we're beating the drum, is like the data points us in a certain direction. The organization doesn't want to change anyway.
Well, and that, I mean, again, we use that example just, I think, to make it palatable, but you could, and that's kind of the intent of tonight, like you could extrapolate that to pretty much every corner of an embedded human performance team.
And I think we will do that a little bit in the next little bit.
I think so. And again, to maybe put a bow on this kind of opening statement and potentially maybe make some people mad, I don't know. But I know some of the terminology and phrasing that you and I have used as we've talked about this amongst ourselves is like the biggest hurdle to the Army's H2F program is the Army itself. And that's, again, not, please don't hear that and think I'm just bashing the entire organization. I'm not. What I'm saying is, and what we'll get into here is like, to use a quote from that article I mentioned, when we look at programs like H2F and when we look at interventions like Aura or whatever other intervention, are we, and this is the quote, are we exploring solutions or coping mechanisms? And I think that's kind of an important question to ask yourself. Like, are we outfitting organizations with solutions to problems in an attempt to change those problems? Or are we just equipping them with coping mechanisms to handle the problems because we have no intention of changing them in the first place? So hopefully that makes sense.
Do you want to do your quote about like regulated nervous systems? Because I have a riff on that, and you put it.
Yeah,
up top,
I'll do that. And again, this is pulling from that article. I promise we won't just continue to do this, but there are some nuggets in there.
I just need this quote to set up my next point. It's important.
Fair play. So, quote, "We have become experts at chemically and physically altering our state to endure lives that are misaligned with who we are. We are not regulating our nervous systems to thrive. We are regulating them to numb ourselves against environments, jobs, and relationships that are slowly killing us." Your riff, sir.
So this has come up on the podcast a couple times, how badly I want to get Dr. Alan Francis, as a guest on this podcast, the author of Saving Normal.
I thought we were close at one point.
I don't think we've ever gotten remotely close. Like, people have offered, like, I've had people at Duke say like, oh, I'm at Duke, like, I'll just reach out to him. And I think they find, like I found, that he's a lot harder to reach than they think he is.
You think it's like Shazam, that movie that like doesn't actually exist, but we all think
I'm pretty sure he exists. I think he's just at a point in his life where he's done with like public engagement.
That's fair.
And he's done some stuff. He's appeared in articles and things like that. So it can't be impossible to reach him. But what I know, one is, if you like, Duke has a normal naming system for email accounts, like first name, last name, at whatever. If you email him at that email address, he doesn't exist. He is in like an endowed chair position at Duke. And if you have somebody who's at Duke look him up on their internal system, his email address is actually the name of the person who endowed the chair, not himself. Like, he goes by like essentially like a fake name in their email system, just to like add like one layer. And I think I've even emailed that email and still gotten nothing. So he's a hard man to reach. Nobody else cares about how hard it is to reach Alan Francis, though, because they're just waiting for a podcast. They care about what he wrote about and the work he's done. And his book is largely about like the medicalization of normal mental challenges, psychological challenges. And the way I've articulated it, and people get mad at me about this sometimes, but usually when we get to have like an honest conversation back and forth, they realize where I'm coming from. Yes, the hot take version is aggressive. The hot take version is, a lot of the things we call disorders are actually totally healthy responses to broken systems or systems that were not designed with human health in mind. Some like a classic example is that if you're in the youngest, like if you're a kid and you're in the younger half of your class, like your birth date falls on the younger half of the group that goes into a certain grade, you are drastically more likely to get diagnosed with ADHD, which
Hmm.
suggests that you might not actually have like a clinical condition. You might just be slightly less mature than your peers in that grade, right? That's not a medical condition, but we medicate it. Um, and there's a million examples, right? Like there's a lot of crappy stuff going on in the world right now. If you are just constantly consuming stressful, scary, horrible, traumatic content from your phone 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 hours a day, like it's probably not like a disorder that you have some symptoms of anxiety or depression or stress or things like that. You're just like you didn't you didn't evolve to deal with that much bad news all the time, right? And and I think there's this through line of like we have humans occupying lifestyles and spaces that were not designed to make them healthy and high performing in the first place. And then we get them to take like supplements or go to
Mm.
doctors or go to counselors or whoever, or like wear wearables or do certain things that like mitigate the symptoms, but they're the symptoms of the life they're living. And we're not willing to change the lives they're living. That's why we have to do the whole band-aids for bullet wounds thing.
And I mean, you kind of stole another quote that we have, which, well played. But literally, it was your nervous system is almost never acting up, it's reacting accurately to the environment.
Yeah.
And I think another way to think about this is through, and I may have taken this from the article, I may not have, but like meditation, right? Or just any other skill that gets taught in, and I know we keep going back to H2F, you could insert whatever acronym for whatever embedded program, but like any skill that gets taught to effectively cope with what we perceive to be stressors, right? To your point, all you're really doing, unless you change the stressor, all you're really doing is just masking it or creating a coping mechanism. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? I don't know if like providers necessarily realize that's what they're doing because it is kind of like 2 or 3 levels above in terms of the cognitive
I
dissonance
mean, I think
piece.
they're doing the best they can with the
Right.
like the changes they can actually influence.
But
And patients often won't even do those things.
I can only think of a handful of times where I have heard a success story of like a provider or a team or whatever recognizing a recurring stressor and then actually going to like the level of decision making to change the stressor. And like again, changing the PT is kind of an example of that, but like sleep, for example, we spend a lot of money and time and effort and energy on these sleep studies, and shout out to Aura because we've had them on the podcast. They're great people, but it's like, have we done anything to really get at why the soldiers aren't sleeping well in the first place? Or are
I
we
mean,
just
in a somewhat serious, somewhat humorous example from literally yesterday in my day job, I was speaking to a bunch of senior leader spouses. So for the most part, spouses of like 3-star and 4-star generals. And it was like a small enough group that we got to have like a real conversation. And one of the things I pointed out is that like we have wearables on all these people, and we can see indications of stress through some of the data in those wearables. And I know for a fact that one of the most prominent causes of high levels of occupational stress for the population I serve were these people's spouses.
yeah, for sure.
And and I said that to them. Like I said in the room,
They
like
probably
some of your
laughed.
spouses, there are like they have auras that make people more stressed all the time. You know what the answer was?
Hmm.
They said, "We know, we're married to them."
Hmm. Mhm. I took a mouthful of tea right as you asked me a question.
Like this is like a phenomenon that we fully understand. And like and a thing I'm going to come back to a bunch of times during this episode because I think it's worth reiterating is that it's it's not our job to eliminate stressors, right? Like the military's job is to prepare people for extreme stress. And one of the ways you prepare for extreme stress is go through moderate stress progressively. And so I don't think we're making an argument here that we need to completely eliminate every challenge in people's lives so that they can be the healthiest version of themselves, because that doesn't make people healthy. What's the quote? A comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there, right? Like you have to be exposed to stress, and you would not do well psychologically if you weren't. It would make you deeply unprepared. I've talked about bulldozer parenting on this platform before. It's a thing we should worry about. Like, we do all these like deox surveys and find everything that's bothering service members, and we do our best to like remove all those stressors like that. Sometimes I think our job is really to like titrate stress, like make sure we're giving them the right dose to optimize their resilience against it in the future, so that we don't put them in a situation they can't handle because we failed to prepare them. Oh,
But
do you think that that gets Klepper right now? But
do you think that that gets used as an excuse to just keep the pedal to the metal all the time?
I think it can be used as an excuse to do that. I think they're, because what I'm not arguing for is keeping the pedal to the metal all the time. Like the same as physical training, you don't get better when you're training, you get better when you recover from that training. So we have to dose it for people at a level they can recover from. And not every kind of stress is like productive adaptation type of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if people haven't been reading the research, there's been some cool recent research that like everything people thought cold plunging was, hot tubs are actually the move. Like hot tubs actually work really well for performance enhancement, and they feel good.
Mm-hmm.
So like things that suck aren't inherently helpful just because they suck. Like having, I think like Fort Hood yesterday or something, it was really cold, so a bunch of pipes burst, and now you have like flooding in people's freezing barracks rooms, and you can't keep like whatever. Like that's stress and suck that probably isn't terribly productive, right?
Mm.
Like we need to give people environments they can recover in, like as part of the deal. If we're also going to give them stress they have to recover from, like you have to do both to make somebody more resilient and higher performing because of the stressors you put on them.
Team, this episode of Mops and Mo's is brought to you by Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a reliable, well-designed platform for programming, tracking, and communicating with athletes. If you've been with us for any length of time, you will know that Train Heroic is the platform that we use to power our own training, long and strong, which you can find at our website, mopsandmos.com. If you're looking for a solid platform to support your own coaching, whether it's your full-time role or a side hustle, Train Heroic is definitely worth checking out. You can use the link in any of our show notes, you can find it in our newsletter, or you can head to our website, mopsandmos.com/training, to get your first week for free. Well, so here is my question for you, for us, for people, because I don't know. I have a sense of the answer, but I don't know. And the question is, are data, or is data, I think the correct way to say this
Our
is
data. It's a plural word, yeah.
Google Sheets is telling me that it should be capitalized. Never mind. Our data at the highest level designed to show where we should create change or where we're returning on investment. And what I mean by that is when you go to a lot of these briefs, and I know we kind of get a bad rap occasionally from like throwing, quote unquote senior leaders under the bus.
They can take it.
Sure. What I'm
resilient.
envisioning,
they've been through a lot of stress.
Right. What I'm envisioning here is like, the metaphorical conference where the brief happens and the data is there and look how great the program is doing and yada, yada, yada. I think what would be interesting is if that conversation shifted a little bit and instead was like, here's the things that we know to be true based on the data we collected. Again, I'll use sleep as an example, or PT happening at 6 a.m. Here are the mechanisms that we have identified that are creating the biggest net negative on these things. And then that becomes the conversation, right? So we're not necessarily briefing senior leaders on, hey, look how great this thing's working. But instead we're showcasing, hey, here's where we think the lowest hanging fruit is in terms of creating change. And I don't know, those conversations might be happening. I don't see them.
I liked, as we were talking about doing this as an episode, I think a day or two ago, you made a point that like the headquarters that get to see all the data are really just looking for good news stories.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are doing the work that created that data, what they want from it is insight into where to focus their efforts.
Right.
Like, hey, this is working and this is not working. So like the data that doesn't tell a good news story is probably not going to get shared, but that data might be more useful because it says like, hey, if your efforts have been focused on like moving the needle on this metric, it's not working. Like it's
Right.
either stagnating or getting worse. And there are certainly examples of that, but like we're not going to publicize it and we're not going to talk about it in forums where people can like make productive choices based on it. So like there kind of needs to be like there's two different kinds of reporting on the data. There's the advertising kind where you're like trying to get more money for your program and convince people it's amazing. And then there's the actual informing decisions kind. And what this makes me keep thinking of is, and I've shared this on this platform before, in my previous job, we used the phrase lessons learned and best practices all the time. It was our job to collect and share lessons learned and best practices.
Sustains and
And,
improves.
yeah. And I think what we mostly share, they weren't lessons learned most of the time. They were lessons we wished people could learn.
Yeah,
And they
that's
weren't
fair.
best practices most of the time. They were practices that we thought might be good because they briefed well. We didn't really know whether they were best practices because we weren't testing them against any other practices,
Yeah, that's a great point.
right? Like we don't know.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, the thought I had when I mentioned that to you the other day, right? This kind of supposed disconnect between up and out data versus down and in data. Like if you're out there and you're on like one of these embedded teams, right? When you go to your commander, what is more impactful? Saying, "Hey, ma'am or sir, here's the companies that have the highest AFT scores." Or, "Hey, ma'am or sir, here's the companies that have the lowest AFT scores." Like the lowest AFT scores are the places where you want to now deploy your coaches, your trainers, whatever. Like that tells you something. And then you
Mm-hmm.
go and you make the change and then rinse and repeat, yada, yada, yada. You're always looking for the points of failure. If all you're ever doing is looking at your high performers, it's like, cool, we can all pat ourselves on the back. Like, hey, thanks for being here. But like, we haven't learned anything. And I just have this sense, again, I understand in the early days of this, and again, we'll use H2F, like I understand the reasoning for the return on investment type metrics. Like, hey, we've put a lot of money into this program. It's working because of this. But I would be more inclined to go to a conference if it was just based off of like one, like, hey, team, this year, the question we're asking is, why are soldiers stressed out? Spend the next 3 days discussing this amongst yourselves, mix and match amongst other installations, blah, blah, blah. Come back 2 or 3 days down the road with a list of possible solutions. We'll take those solutions, we'll brief them at the highest level. Like that would be really cool. But that's not really what happens. So anyway.
I because I don't know how like this is like the classic bureaucratic struggle though.
For sure.
Like
It's not, yeah, this
nobody
is not
wants
exclusive to human performance.
I think about this with like commanders at a lower echelon level. Commanders will know what the problems are inside their formation. And there are probably some where they could be fixed better or faster with resources outside their organization, where they have to let their commander know there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But the way to get the best possible evaluation is to make sure your commander always thinks everything in your little bubble is under control. Like, like Captain Steve over there, like has never asked me for help because he is squared away. Like everything is rock solid. I never need to worry about him.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you raise your hand and say, like, I've identified this problem, I want to get some resources oriented on this problem that I don't have control of, please help. Like you've immediately created a potential like thing to be used against you for future evaluations. Like, oh, you have this problem, but the rest of the commanders don't have that problem. You must not be very good.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm reframing this in like a human performance lens. And it's almost this point where like you think about like your quintessential Giga Chad human performance guy with all the wearables and the training plans and the interventions and the wellness. It's like that's probably the dude that has like the most negative shit going on. And he just has surrounded himself with all these coping mechanisms. Like maybe you should go and figure out what's real. Like, why do you actually need all that stuff? versus assuming that because he or she has all that stuff, like they've got it figured out.
I will say this is going to get dark for a second.
Let's go there.
Several of the fittest humans I know or have interacted with enough to like have a conversation about it have openly shared that they hate themselves
For sure.
and are fueled by that.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's good phrasing.
I don't think that's a problem for us to solve on this podcast, but
For
like
sure. But that's exactly it. Like that's the Pandora's box piece, because I think when you frame this through the lens of enterprise-wide interventions, creating change, you would assume that these programs, like the point of these programs is to constantly pursue weakness. Like that's really why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I go back to the point we made at the beginning. It's like you would hope that at some point we have figured out the data piece. We have the dashboard, we have the system, the app, whatever, the wearable. We're getting all of this real-time insight. And I just wonder if when we have that, like what's the appetite for change? Or will we just spend more money to create more Band-Aids?
I'm going to add a layer to that, just like help define what you mean by constantly pursue weakness. But our programs exist not to raise the ceiling, but to raise the floor.
I don't think many people realize that.
But like it's superficially obvious if you think about like
for sure.
If you ever go look at any of the documents from like when these programs were established about like, hey, these are the problems we need money to solve so I can start a program. It's like nobody at the Pentagon is tracking how many people have perfect scores on their PT tests. People at the Pentagon are tracking how many people are failing their PT test.
Mm-hmm.
They're tracking how many people are non-deployable. They're tracking how many people are broke. Like they're tracking the rates of the issues around the floor, not how many people you can get to the ceiling. Like pushing the ceiling is cool. And the people that are pushing the ceiling are the ones who are going to be most engaged with human performance staff. Like they're going to seek you out, right? Like in my day job, I work in an organization that is not very physically cultured, we'll say.
Not very ceiling-like.
But despite that, we have a regular flow of people through our space who are pursuing Ironmans and Spartan races and whatever, like all like high level fitness things, like want to go to military schools, want to go to selections, want to go to all this stuff, right? They're fun to work with and they seek us out, but they are not the people that we were hired to help, right? Because they will take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're slightly off track of like where I think the episode's supposed to go, but
it all kind of, I think it all gets
relevant.
It all kind of falls under the same umbrella. And I mean, you have a great point here. I don't want to steal your quote that I think you're actually about to highlight. Yep, you just highlighted it in real time. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. This ties in a little bit to like our bad coaches episode that I think is. Did we release that? Is that out now? Yeah, it's out now. One of my biggest questions surrounding data, because this whole conversation is, are we prepared to make changes based on all this data we're trying to collect? And one of the easiest ways to realize that the answer is probably no is we don't really make changes based on the data we already have. And my easiest example of that, most superficially obvious one, is the Army knows, and we've seen this in some of the publicly released data, and it's definitely true in some of the internal stuff, but despite dramatically lower standards on the current 2-mile run compared to what the APFT standards were on the 2-mile run years and years ago. And yeah, you can all like scream into your whatever device you're listening to us on that there's more events before it now and you're tired. I got it. But like, despite way lower run standards, the 2-mile run is currently both the lowest scoring on average event on the Army fitness test and the most failed event on the Army fitness test. We know that. And that is true in basically every unit. I have not personally run into a unit where that is not the case. And yet, what parts of physical performance are our coaches most focused on? Like, which training sessions are they the most present at? What are they working on programs designed around? Like, I am sure that coaches are designing like programs for soldiers that have failed their 2-mile run and how to get better. But if we look at like where they spend their time and effort and like the things we invest in, I bet most coaches are most engaged in the weight room and leave cardio / running up to the unit to figure out on their own when the coaches aren't necessarily there with them. And
1,000%.
like, if we were really so data driven, we would leave the weight room up to the coaches because everybody's passing. We would leave the weight room up to the soldiers because everybody's passing the deadlift. We're not really worried about that. And all the coaches would be totally focused on like conditioning sessions, like running based.
See that, and that's again, like that's why we call this Pandora's box. Because like once you realize that, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Now you have to justify the why. And I mean, I get. And again, to take this back to like a senior leader level, right? I mean, to your earlier point, like you obviously are going to have mechanisms in place in a military that are not conducive to human flourishing. Like I understand it's just the nature of the beast, right? But I think what programs like this owe leadership is an honest analysis of where the biggest impacts are so that they can then make a decision to say, okay, like we understand that like XYZ is creating a whole lot of stress and it's really creating a lot of problems with sleep. However, because of the geopolitical climate, we can't change that piece, but we can go after ABC over here. And hey, what do you know? We may actually be able to put it into doctrine that you could PT at any time, whatever, just use an example. That type of thing should be what's happening. Instead, I think, again, like you mentioned earlier, it's like, here's all the soldiers that we have that have really high scores on our AFT test. Like, thumbs up, our program's working. I think we've missed the mark, and I don't know what the next stage of this looks like, so to speak.
And I think it's worth taking a second to say that like there is merit to the idea that your intervention does not have to be focused on the thing to change the thing. A lot of this is about like underlying root causes influence symptoms that are in a different category. One I've heard all the time is that like a criticism I have heard of H2F is that there are no mental health providers on an H2F team.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will make arguments about scope of practice for occupational therapists, whatever, not traditionally under the umbrella of behavioral health providers, but yes, some of it gets into there. But more importantly, I think it addresses the fact that like mental health treatment is not the only way to influence mental health outcomes. I don't know if this fits into the conversation or not, but I started thinking about it when you were saying everything you were saying is that yes, you can like go look at, actually, I'll back up. The way I describe the role of the coaches on my team in my day job is their job is step one with an individual or a group, figure out all the possible levers they could pull to improve health, fitness, wellness, performance in their organization. And step two, identify among those levers, because there's probably like 100, which ones they are actually willing to pull, like which changes they're actually going to make in a sustainable way. And that is a part of this problem set, is that they're not going to be willing to pull every lever. Like once you identify all the things that are wrong with someone's lifestyle behavior, they're not going to change it all overnight. This is why I don't like the whole 75 hard thing, because it is specifically not sustainable. Like it's a thing you grind through it for this period of time and supposedly you gain something afterwards. I would rather see my classic, I don't know if I've done it on this podcast, but like I've seen posts on social media, like I don't care about 75 hard. I want to see 365 medium. I actually don't even care about 365 medium. I care about like 250 or 300 medium, because I know you're going to have days where like you're not doing the thing necessarily.
We should create that program.
300 medium?
300 medium. Yeah.
Sustainable lifestyle change. It's not a big deal. Just like change one thing and stick to it.
I
don't think that sells.
No, and to chase that point, because I had this conversation earlier today with an athlete, and I think we may have even said this in our bending talk, but it's like real strength and conditioning, real effective strength and conditioning is not doing hard things. It's doing the least amount of work you have to do to get better.
But consistently for a long ass time.
But that doesn't sell. It's not sexy.
It's like your Just Run article. Like we can like wax poetic about periodization models and zone 2 and Norwegian 4x4s and
run.
whatever. But like 99.9% of the people having conversations about whether zone 2 works or not would be better off if they just ran 3 to 4 days a week and stopped skipping so many sessions.
1000%. And here, so to get us back on track, this is sorry, because this is another quote from that article, and I hate when we just continue to refer back to a single source, but I do think that this concisely reiterates the point that we're trying to make here, and bear with me because this is a paragraph or so, but the danger lies in that relief you feel from regulating. Because you feel better, you stay. The state change technique effectively raises your threshold for abuse, but you never remove the abuser. In fact, you enable it. By tolerating the intolerable for one more day, one more week, one more year, you are not fixing the problem. You are biohacking your way into captivity. Stockholm syndrome for your day to day. And I think if one phrase kind of summarizes,
It's heavy.
It's right? Because I think if one phrase summarizes the kind of quips that we often make about like, oh, the biggest hurdle to H2F is the Army, blah, blah, blah. It's this exact thing, right? I mean, like, does a program like H2F, right? Are we affecting policy level change? Are we changing the direction of the military the way that the data shows us we should? Or are we injecting a lot of techniques and tricks,
coping mechanisms
to survive a system that refuses to change? I think that's kind of the question, right? And I don't have an answer.
And I think part of it is like the military should be hard.
Yeah.
I think that's like a thing we have to get over. So like we don't need to like some
the answer's in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, some teaching people coping mechanisms is important. Like we're going to make you do hard things. We should equip you with the tools to get through those hard things. But some of the things we make you cope with are not productive, and we should remove those irritants from the system. Yeah.
Well, and I think to the point we've been making now a couple of times about the levers, right? There's going to, metaphorically speaking, figuratively speaking, there's a lot of levers you could pull. Some you can't necessarily, because we do, in fact, to your point, need to have a certain level of stress. But what I would argue is that if you identify levers that are pullable and you have good leadership in place to kind of have have the balls to pull the levers, then some of those kind of harder levers become less of a threat because you've now cleared up a lot of, what's the phrase I want to use here? Like you basically cleared up a lot of adaptation currency, right? For soldiers, sailors, airmen, to be able to cope with some of those things.
Do we need to take a second and redefine adaptation currency? I have not posted about this in a long time, and I've been meaning to bring it back on the social media.
We can, I guess, off the cuff. I don't know if I made this up. I don't want to say that I did because that seems to be giving myself too much credit. But it's effectively this idea that you have like X units of adaptation currency within your system, and then the stressors that get applied to you, be those back squats, front squats, bench press, or be those angry spouse, poor sleep, shitty nutrition. I mean, these are all stressors, right? Each one of those takes a toll on your, adaptation bank account, your adaptation currency. I went to business school. That might be where this is coming from. And so when you mitigate some of those stressors, or when your body adapts to some of those stressors in a positive sense, like the back squat example, you expel or you spend less adaptation currency to handle those stressors, if that makes sense.
While you're talking, I'm trying to find the graphic I made for it, but I think I made it before I started using Canva to make all my graphics. I think it was a PowerPoint special.
The old days.
Yeah.
The old days.
But the origins of Mops and Mo's were just PowerPoint slides I put on Instagram.
I think the important point there, and what really we harp about all the time, is that these are strength and conditioning principles, but the effective coach will understand that these apply to all aspects of your existence, because that you really are, when you're dealing in stress, as strength coaches are, you have to account for all the stress, not just the gym-based stress.
Yeah. So the graphic, and I know this is like me now verbally describing an image, which is not the best way to make podcast content, but the graphic, like, there are things that fill your tank and there are things that empty your tank. And the things that fill your tank contribute, like, they're deposits into your adaptation currency account, and the things that empty your tank are withdrawals from your adaptation currency account. And genetics play a big role in how much adaptation currency you have. We can't change that. But a lot of other
Genetics
things
determine what bank you're banking at. If we really want to take this
your
metaphor
interest
too
rate
far.
and stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
But like the amount of sleep you get, the food you eat, the all these things make deposits into how much adaptation currency you have. And then one thing that makes withdrawals is your training, but you also make withdrawals for all the other stressors in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the point I like to make with this, because I have seen the classic like theoretically motivational fitness influencer post where it's like, oh, I only slept 3 hours last night and I was up drinking the night before and whatever, but like I'm still here at the gym at 4 a.m. That's not discipline. Like actual discipline would have been getting upstream and like actually getting a decent night's sleep the night before and not being hungover, because
being a turd.
And this is my like hot take line at the end of it is, it's not discipline to keep emptying the tank if you don't have the discipline to fill the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you're constantly making withdrawals, that's cool, but it only works if you're also making equivalent deposits, and that's not as like sexy necessarily.
And to just beat the shit out of a dead horse, you gotta spend money to make money, right? And so,
oh no,
right? Because I think people will hear that, like working out, for example, that is a withdrawal from your account, so to speak. But that's
you
positive.
You cannot recovery your way to high performance. That's
correct.
Also true.
Yes, correct. And so again, to bring this back to Pandora's box conversation, if the supposed intent of all of this data that we're supposedly collecting is to identify these levers and figure out where, like, again, not where we're doing well, but where we're sucking feasibly to tie it in with the adaptation currency. Like, again, if we are to eliminate, or if we eliminate some of those things, we can diversify or divest rather, and then reinvest in some of the more higher priced items. We're really like we get it,
Drew. Your first degree was in business. We understand.
And then we get into real estate. No,
I got a question. If you're the business guy, how come I'm doing all the taxes?
Because I, as you've clearly stated, am not an employee of this company.
That's fair.
You're I just show up on the podcast. Oh, damn man.
All right, that's fair. You got me.
Speaking of people getting paid for things, do you want to drop your soldiers getting more money point?
I was going to say that one for the end, but we'll knock it out right now because we are on the finance thing. I think I do wonder, and I'll set this up with a different example first. My litmus test for recovery modalities is, would you get more recovery if you took the time you were going to spend on that thing and just took a nap instead? And I think most recovery modalities would fail that test, like Normatec leggings or cold plunging or but like all these things. Like, what if you just took a nap instead? Would that be better? And like, I think
it's pretty good.
In like 90% of cases, the nap would probably be better. So like, let's be real about what we're
doing.
But
a nap with Normatec boots on in a cold tub would be the most better. The most better.
But this is a different litmus test, and this is outside the scope of individuals making decisions. But like, all the things we like spend money on to try and make soldiers perform better or have a higher quality of life, I think the litmus test for that should be, is it more or less effective than if we had just given that to soldiers in the form of higher pay? And like, if we get real for a second, like social determinants of health stuff, like how much money you make plays a strong role in like the fitness levels you achieve, the quality of food you eat. Like, lots of health outcomes are influenced by just how much money you make. And I think if we got like, it's one of the classics, like the government operates in an other people's money kind of way. Like the people that are making decisions about spending are not making those decisions with the same scrutiny they would if it was their money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good test for, is like, instead of spending it on things you think are good for them, like what if you just gave them the money and let them spend it on the things they think are good for them? I'm not saying that's the solution to all our problems, but I think we should go through that thought exercise.
For sure. Just give them the money.
How many soldiers do you think, if human performance programs in the military cost money and soldiers had to pay to use them?
That's what I was just thinking about. That was an undeveloped idea in my head as you were talking. It was like, what if you set up like a health savings account for soldiers, and they got it wouldn't be like real money because they couldn't go to like Chipotle. Well, maybe they could. But yeah, to your point, how many would spend money on human performance?
Here's a hard one. Would
Less
they
than you
take that money and spend it with your team, or would
see,
they
that
go
would
off
be
base,
interesting. That
or
would
would
be
they go off
interesting.
base and spend it at like a gym in town?
Or not even off base. What if you just had like a competitive environment for embedded teams on an
Uh
installation
huh.
and soldiers had that'd be
Yeah, like the
wild,
teams
dude.
are like no longer embedded in specific units. They're just like
Yeah.
whichever one's the most popular, and then their budget is determined by that.
You
Like
basically have a bunch of CrossFit gyms on an installation and people get to choose where they which team are you a member of? Man, that'd be nuts.
that'd be pretty sick.
I
That'd be a
can't
fun pilot program.
I gotta sit there and think about that for a few days to figure out if that's a net positive or a negative.
I mean, it comes back to the buy-in thing we talked about, right?
Sure.
Like if soldiers had to put their own money on the line, they would probably try harder at the thing they're
Yeah.
sent to do.
I think you could reward soldiers with money for achieving certain holistic benchmarks. That would be an interesting concept.
I mean, I've been saying for a long time, we give veterans a ton of money for being broken. What
Yeah,
if
we've
we
said this
were
before.
also willing to give veterans money for like taking care of themselves? And it's hard to do, but like so is
yeah.
like it was hard to create the disability program, and we still did that.
You
So,
basically take Colonel Klepper's kind of old 173rd list that he had,
Mhm.
and you just attach money to it.
yeah,
Man, are we still on the topic? I don't even remember if this is part of
I'm
what
not
we're-
sure. Should we come back to something that was actually on our notes?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll sling one that people have heard me say before. Because at this point, we're just like giving examples of places
Mhm.
where I'm not sure the Army would take action based on the data if we put all the data in front of the right leaders. And this is one I've been thinking about a lot. As we mentioned at the top, we're pretty fresh off that Fort Benning Human Performance Summit, and I heard a lot of discussion of the future plans for H2F integrators and H2F advisors across active component as well as the reserve and guard. And some listeners will be familiar with the previous name for those things, just master fitness trainer. And I know we've updated the curriculum a little bit to include more of the holistic stuff. But the question I've always had, because I taught that course for a long time and I thought it was a really fun course to teach, but I have not yet been convinced that all the work I did for those years made any difference. And what I would have to see to convince me that it made a difference, and this is measures of effectiveness rather than measures of performance, because we measured the heck out of the performance. We measured like how many people graduated in each class. We measured how many classes we got through. The total throughput determined the budget for the schoolhouse. We kept track of how many people in the Army had the ASI, all that kind of stuff. What we did not measure was, did units who had people with that ASI have better outcomes on all the metrics we think they should influence than units that did not have people with that ASI? And in theory, it should not be hard to figure that out, because part of the reason that whole additional skill identifier system exists is to keep track of those people and what units they are in across the force. So it would be a fairly simple G1 kind of poll to figure out which units have them, which units have like the intended ratio, which units have some but not quite the intended ratio, and which units don't have people. I think you just take that and then you look at all the exact same things we analyze for return on investment of human performance programs and see if that moved the needle independent of actual human performance staff. We keep on doubling down on this program of like saying this thing works, but I would love to see, because I don't know, maybe it does work, maybe it doesn't. I have no idea because we haven't, as far as I know, no one's done that analysis. I don't know
That's
if people with the
kinda
power to do
like-
that are listening, but I would love to help with that project.
Again, that's kind of the whole question here. Like, is this an environment where we want to find out what doesn't work? Because you mentioned the
know.
OER example, which I think kind of frames at its very base. Like, if the foundation of your organization is predicated upon, don't tell me what's wrong, tell me what you're doing right. Inevitably, that blossoms into a much larger kind of cultural mindset. And I of course, if one-on-one with anybody, they're going to tell you that they want to know where the problems are, identify, fix the thing. But like, we're talking on an institutional level. And I'm going to steal the athletic trainer example because I think it fits right here. the athletic trainer situation is an exact like case in point, right? We said it here ourselves. Everybody else was clamoring about it when this cut happened, but like athletic trainers, far and away, were I would argue the most effective, per the evidence, the most effective component of embedded human performance teams.
I
Like
do want
they,
to take a second before Drew continues and mention, because this came up when I posted about some of that stuff. I think a lot of people don't really understand what athletic trainers are. When we say athletic trainer, we don't mean personal trainer and we don't mean strength coach. We mean like acute musculoskeletal specialists. They are an allied health profession. The way you have most likely seen an athletic trainer is when like an NFL player gets hurt on the field and somebody rushes out to like quickly evaluate them and take immediate response actions. Those are athletic trainers. It is different from
yes,
strength coaches. It is different from personal trainers. Some of
yes.
that confusion played into this, and the fact that they like blur the line between human performance and medical also presented some concerns. But we very
Yes.
nearly had all of them cut from the H2F program, despite the fact that they are, and I know physical therapists can point to studies that they have and all that kind of stuff, but like in terms of research done on like one specific profession's return on investment, specifically in the military setting, athletic trainers had fantastic evidence. Every
Mhm.
branch had like research done on this, that these folks saved more money than they cost and worked really well. Um, but it wasn't any of that data that saved them. It was the politics of the moment and like certain commanders speaking up and saying they're really important to us, and a lot of like political advocacy on the Hill by governing bodies and things like that. Like coming back to like opening Pandora's box and like, do we want to make changes based on data? It seems like we're much more interested in making changes based on politics
Mhm.
than we are on data.
I think that thinking back to it, I think that was the inflection point for me personally in like starting to raise the questions of like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of collecting data if something like this could happen? Where, and this isn't from like I'm not arguing this from a personal level or anything, but just purely objectively, you could not argue with the fact that this profession was a massive return on investment, yet we were about to replace them with 68 whiskeys, which are combat medics.
No, we weren't
And
even going to
that's
replace them with 68 whiskeys. So we weren't going to increase the number of 68 whiskeys. We were just going to like expect the
correct.
68 whiskeys
Right.
we already had to
They were
step
just going
up
to
on
become
something
athletic trainers.
they're not very well trained for. And then we were going to hire more strength coaches, even though we're already struggling with
Yes.
hiring enough and high enough quality strength
Wild.
coaches.
So again, I think it goes back to the question that we keep asking and circling back to and whatever. It's like, let's explore the logical endpoint of this discussion we keep having about data and dashboards and wearables and metrics and all the things. And let's ask ourselves, like, once that exists, because it will, hopefully, where are we going to draw the line in terms of where we as an organization are willing to make change? Because I think what's unique and quite honestly, what's very powerful about an organization like the Army is that change oftentimes can happen with the flick of a pen. Like it is structured such that senior type leaders can implement change. I don't want to say easily, but relatively quickly. And if when presented with all of that information, those changes aren't willing to be made, then like what is it all for? I think is the sort of cynical take.
We should probably wrap up soon. Do we want to wrap up here? Or do we want to hammer out some of these sleep examples before we go? Because sleep is an interesting one.
You could do, I mean, we can do sleep.
I think my question on sleep stuff, and this spans we've a lot of the conversation we've had today, and a lot of the conversation we have on every episode orbits around the Army specifically because they're the core of our audience. I get it, but my examples for this one span beyond the Army. Um, like specifically within the Army, this would be aviators. I think it would apply to the most. But as we start to look at like other services, so like other service aviators, other service, like cyber stuff, intel stuff, like anybody that does shift work, this applies to. Um, Anybody who works on an op floor specifically. But I think there's this question of like if we really knew how bad people's sleep was, the logical answer would be to like either reduce or adjust their workload. And not that their workload is the only thing that contributes to sleep. Like you can put people on shift work and they can make horrible sleep hygiene decisions, and those are their own. So like part of it's personal, part of it's professional. But like if if you put a wearable on a pilot and it's time for them to fly their mission and the wearable says they're not recovered very well, are you going to cancel the mission? And I think and it becomes like a liability conversation, right? Because if you don't cancel the mission, but then something bad happens and the commander knew about the bad recovery data, is it the commander's fault now? Like they assumed that level of risk. Is there going to be some kind of investigation? There's just like layers and layers of this thing. And if you take somebody out of commission because their recovery data is bad, it's that much more stress and that much more work on everybody who's left, because we don't have that many places that are overstaffed and we have a lot of places that are understaffed.
Mm-hmm.
The version of this I have seen more recently is an Air Force specific version with the do not arm list in security forces. And where this comes from is security forces is undermanned. Lots of like the way the Air Force does deployments is they don't necessarily deploy a whole unit at once. They pluck people out of a unit and send them on a deployment. But then like the home station mission is still there, but you have just slightly fewer people because they got plucked to go on a mission. And people get stretched really thin. And if you stretch people thin, some people break. And usually that breaking point in this case is a behavioral health type of thing. And certain behavioral health issues get you put on a do not arm list, which means you can't carry a weapon. And as soon as you're on the do not arm list, now we have to go back and adjust the shifts for everybody else because the same amount of work still exists. We just have one less person who can man those roles. And so it's this cycle of it just keeps getting worse because people were stretched thin enough that somebody broke. Now we're going to stretch the remaining people thinner, bet somebody else breaks. And we're going to stretch the remaining people even thinner than that. And it's just going to keep getting worse. And we're going to find out who can survive the meat grinder the longest. Like, we might collect data that shows us what the problem is, but the only options we have for how to take care of the situation make other problems worse. So, yes, there's other ways. Like, the other way to solve it is to get more people into that career field so they're not so undermanned. But this, like, what level are the decisions going to be made on? Are we going to give the data to people at, like, the 05, 06 level? Because they don't get to decide how many people we recruit and how many authorizations they have in their unit. They just get all the people and are told to accomplish the mission. Are we going to have the serious conversations at the like 09 level, 010 level, like 3-star, 4-star level? Like, are we going to get real about the people who can actually move the needle on some of these problems? I don't know.
I want to have this conversation with Andrew Thompson.
I've been thinking about Andrew a lot while we've had this talk, and I need to check in with him, and hopefully he's doing well enough soon that we can have him on here.
Yeah, because I know
he's the guy to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, I know we have blind spots here, but again, hopefully this was clear at the outset, but there's a massive caveat to this, which is that this is kind of an emerging thought of ours. It could turn into a talk in a public forum. I guess
you're not about to close, are you?
No, you can keep going.
Okay, I gotta sneak one more thing in before you close.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make the point that like we're going to come back to this because again, once Pandora's box, right? Once you open it, you can't like unsee it. So go ahead.
Mine is just that when we talk about sleep, it brings to mind where the actual solutions are, and I think a lot about hots and cots, and I like all the pictures of barracks that are like 85 degrees at night, and like Hawaii right now where we're smashing more people into rooms that were not designed for that many people. And who knows when certain people have to go to work and like if you're sharing a room, like you don't even have a door between you and the other person. Like if they got to get up, you're going to be awake. Sorry. Like putting a wearable on a person and teaching them about sleep hygiene is interesting. But like if the environment they sleep in sucks, all the wearable is going to do is remind them of that. It's not going to equip them to make anything better. It's just going to make them more pissed off about the conditions that are already bad.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that brings us now to my closing quote now makes a lot of sense.
You're welcome. I planned that. I don't even know what your closing quote is.
It's hidden in the notes document. So again, I guess just to put a bow on all of this, right, which I feel like we've done a lot of circling back, but it's important. the conversation at hand and the point that we want to make is that all of us out there that are doing this kind of embedded human performance thing, right? Regardless of your branch, whatever, we're all in pursuit of like optimization. And my question maybe here is like, once the data shows us what is holding back that supposed optimization, are we as an organization, as a culture, whatever, how far are we willing to go to make the changes to respond to that data? We've talked a lot about wearables. We've talked a lot about interventions. We've talked a lot about things that are already in play. Are they creating a better environment? Are they like just creating a situation that allows folks to cope with an environment that we are unwilling to change? And so the quote that I will close with, again, referring back to that article, which we will have in our show notes about putting Band-Aids on bullet wounds, the quote is, normal, quote unquote, normal is using these interventions to live a better life, not just survive the one you have. And so as we open up Pandora's box here on this podcast, hopefully we can all collectively start to think about what that truly does look like to manufacture the best possible life, not just survive the one that is unwilling to be changed. Close.
I am looking forward to the audience feedback on this one.
Me too. Let's have a conversation. The end.
Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.